Hey everyone. So I got an email through YouTube a couple of nights ago, and it spurred a conversation today about using reverse lenses for macros and what type of reverse lenses really work the best. And I didn't really know the answer. It was originally phrased as if you reverse a macro lens using a lens reverse, does it turn into a telephoto? Well, the answer to that I found out was no. But then that evolved from there. So the question is, what is the best lens to reverse mount? So what I have here represents a nice selection of lenses from 200 millimeters, which is this one over here, down to 24 millimeters. This is an old, I have 4 Nikkor pre-AI lenses, a 200, a 105, a 135, and the 43 to 86, a Nikkor E 36 through 72, a Canon FD mount, 100 millimeter f4 1:1 macro, my Sigma 50 millimeter 1:1 macro, a Canon 24 millimeter f2.8, and then a trusty old Tokina 50 millimeter 1:1.4 rather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this coin, which is an Australian $2 coin I found on the floor of a restaurant the other day, a Waffle House of all places, in California. Who knows how it got there, but that seems like a good enough reason to have that be our test subject. So what I'm going to do is I've got here a lens reverse mount, which is a 55 millimeter thread, a 55 to 52 step down, and a 52 to 49, and that's going to cover everything that I've got here. And so what I'm going to do is, it stands to reason that, logically, that the 200 millimeter would make the best macro lens. But logic doesn't always bear out. If logic always bore out the way we think it will, then Einstein's cosmological constant would not have later been referred to by him as the biggest mistake of his career. So my thought is that, and this is my assertion, was that the wider angle the lens, the more powerful the macro that it's going to be. So I'm actually going to try and find a 28 millimeter as well, as if I can, but I don't think I'm using it to record right now, so actually I don't have a 28 that'll fit, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, I think that the 24 and the 50 will probably be the best, the Tokina. And then I think the 200 is basically going to be useless as a reverse mounted macro lens. Then I'm guessing that the zooms probably won't work that well, but the 105 will probably also be very, very good. So those are my guesses, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch out the lenses, and I'll tell you what lens I'm using as I record it, and then I'm going to grab another camera and I'll take a quick picture of the setup so we can see the lens that I'm using and the distance from camera to subject, because that's another important part of the macro setup. Now there's no bellows involved in this, no macro tubes, just the lens reverse mount. Alright, so here's the setup with the 200 millimeter, and I've got it set very, very close to the coin. Some of you might be wondering why it is that I said I expect the wider angles to be more effective as zooms, and my thinking on that is that a wide angle grabs a large angle of view and then brings it into a small area on the image capturing on the media surface. So I think that's going to work in reverse, and whereas it's demagnifying everything in normal operation, it will super magnify everything in reverse operation. That seems logical to me, but I could be wrong. So what I'm going to do now is go over to the K7, and we're going to see how it looks with the 200 millimeter Nikkor-Q 1:4 mounted on it, and what kind of macro we get. Okay, so we're back, and apologize, the sound's going to change every time we do a cut like this because The my girlfriend's little Optio does not have a mic jack, whereas my K7 does. So this evenly blurry, sort of grayish screen you're seeing is what it looks like through the 200mm macro. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod here, and I'm going to shine it around my kitchen. And this is what we get. That's the ceiling light, the counters, the cabinets, and then we're back. At no distance does this focus. Everything is just a creamy, creamy blur. So the 200mm is not functional as a reverse-mounted macro lens. Back here with the 135, that's a Nikkor-Q 135 mounted on here, and it's an f3.5 lens. And so that's the subject distance again, and if this works, that's great. We'll come back and I'll show you what distance it works at. If it doesn't work, then we'll see that too. Alright, so we're back with the 135, and here I'm pointing at the coin, as you just saw. And I'm going to take this and shine it around the kitchen again. And similar to the 200, there's no focal distance at which this focuses as a macro lens. There's no distance from the lens. In fact, I've got my finger almost touching the element and nothing still. So this 135 reverse mounted is not going to work as a macro lens. Alright, and we're back with my Canon CF 100mm 1:1 macro, and I just learned the hard way that my 105 Nikkor has a dented filter ring. I guess I'd already known that, I just forgotten because, anyway. But, so we're going to skip that one. But I'm fairly certain that the results would be the same, or basically the same as the 100. Hopefully. Maybe it's because this is a macro lens, the functionality will be meaningfully different. At any rate, so here's a 100, we're going to cut over to that, and we're going to see what the focal distance on this as a macro lens will be. Alright, so this looks better. We can at least tell that there's a coin here. Well, because I'm telling you it's a coin, you'll know. At any rate, so let's see if this will actually focus. And we're moving away. That's my banana basket. Oh, and behind it, my shelf of cameras, one of my shelves of cameras, and a chess set made of salt shakers that I got. And those are pretty close to being in focus. Go over here to my coffee mill, not in focus. So from here to those cameras is about 14 feet. I don't think that's any different than a standard 100mm. So I'm going to submit that there's really, and I'm adjusting the zoom helicoil right now and nothing's happening. So I'm going to submit that this doesn't really do too much as a macro lens when reverse mounted, because that clearly was not anywhere near macro territory. In fact, I don't think that was anything other than standard magnification for a 100mm lens. Alright, and here is my setup for the Sigma 50mm reverse mounted, and that's the distance to the coin right now. So what we're going to do is go over to the K7 and take a look and see how this looks. I'm optimistic that this macro lens will function as a macro lens when reverse mounted. But let's find out. Well, this result doesn't seem to be promising. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the coin, which we can see here now, and I'm going to bring it towards the lens. Oh, focusing, it's getting in focus. And there we go. That is in focus. And that is, I'm going to say, 3 inches from the front of the lens, maybe 5 centimeters, give or take, to get focus. And this is f2.8. Now, interestingly, we're not even getting the entire coin in focus, which means that this is somewhat better than 1:1. Yeah, this is somewhat better than a 1-to-1 ratio right now. Not much, but we know that the reverse-mounted 50mm Sigma macro will function as a macro lens in reverse. Of course, I've lost all the great things about it, such as aperture control and communication with the camera, which kind of makes it pointless to mount in reverse. Yeah, probably be better just using it the way it's designed. I've gone and swapped out the Sigma macro, and this is the Takumar 50mm 1-to-1.4 on here. Now, this is also a 50mm, so I have a prediction based on what we saw with the Sigma that this is also going to work as a macro lens reverse mounted, but because it's a 1.4, the depth of field is going to be incredibly shallow. Oops, don't want to unscrew it. I'm also going to guess that because it's a macro, because it's also a 50mm lens, that the focal point's going to be near as makes no difference, the exact same spot as with the Sigma, even though the Sigma's a macro lens and this is just a standard 50. Let's go find out. Alright, we're back here with the Takumar, and that's the background you're seeing. Here's the coin. I'm going to move it closer and closer and closer and coming into focus, and we're getting basically the same magnification as we got with the Sigma, which isn't really a surprise. They're both 50s. In fact, I'd say we're getting the exact same magnification, but you can see this really swirly bokeh effect that's going on because of the 1.4 aperture. It's got a very narrow depth of field and just goes all buttery and creamy like these Takumars are known for very quickly. So this is the 50mm. So far what it looks like, I don't have an 85mm to reverse mount, unfortunately, but it's right now 50mm looks like the furthest focal length that will function as a macro lens, and actually 55 probably will work just fine as well. But interesting that the 50mm are giving us better magnification than the 100s, which would seem to support the theory that the wider the lens, the better the magnification will be. So I found a 28 that's going to fit on here that I can reverse mount. Let's see what happens with that. Okay, so before we get to the 28, I forgot to mention, I think maybe I forgot to mention, the focal point for the 50mm Takumar was also about 5 centimeters. I do have something pretty interesting to show you about that Takumar that I forgot to show you. That's the rear element. That's right, it's cracked. And what I'll do later, I have three copies of this lens. At least 2 of them are made differently. So anyway, so I'll have another video there to make. But here's a 28. This is a Tokina 28mm, 1-to-2.8. And the distance there is probably about 6.5, 7 inches from subject to coin. And let's go over to the K7 and find out what's happening with this and if it works as a macro lens. Alright, so we're back with the Tokina, and everything is all blurry at 6 inches. So I'm going to bring the coin closer and closer to the camera and see if it comes into focus. And it is. And that is super magnification. That's just enormous. I'm honestly really kind of surprised by just how much this is magnifying the coin. That's the $2 mark. I know it looks like a 7, it's upside down. But that's the $2 mark on the Australian $2 coin, and I'm going to guess that that is all of a 1/4 inch tall. And you can see it's taking up almost the full sensor. The other side, I mean, this magnification, you can see the tooling marks and the signs where this coin has bounced into other things in people's pockets, and this is pretty darn impressive. So that's 28. That gives me a lot of hope for the 24mm that it's going to be doing even more magnification. 24mm reverse mounted on the K7. pointing at the coin, and I'm really optimistic that this is going to be the most magnification that we've seen so far. Unfortunately, I have an 18mm lens, but it has a 72mm front element, or has a 72mm ring. So I can't mount it on the front of my camera without getting another adapter. But if this provides more magnification than the 28 did, there's a good chance I'm going to drop $5 on that adapter just to see if that 18 does even more than this one does. So let's go over to the K7 and see what kind of magnification we're getting out of this 24. My prediction, the most yet. Okay, so here we are with the 24. I've got the coin, there it is. I'm going to bring it up towards the sensor, or towards the lens, and holy cow, that is a lot of magnification. In fact, I have to turn the coin sideways to get the entire 2 into the frame. That's unbelievable to me how much magnification that is. To give you an idea of distance, I'm going to say that I am 2.5 centimeters from the element. You know, it's interesting, if 5 centimeters on the 50, 2.5 on this, I'm guessing that that's not coincidence, and there's probably some correlation there, causal relationship, in fact. So that is the 24. Now, I also brought out a couple of zooms, a 36 to 72 and a 43 to 86. So I'm going to mount those next, and let's see if zooms even work reverse mounted as macro lenses. My prediction is that neither of them will work as macro lenses. Alright, so here's the 43 to 86, and what we're going to do, that was at 43, this is at 86, is I will test it throughout the range, throughout the zoom range as a macro lens, and we're going to see whether or not this performs. And like I said, I think that these are going to do just the same thing that the 200 and the 135 did, and I think it's just going to be blurry, gooey messes coming through the lens. But let's find out. Okay, and here we are at the 43. This is pretty unpromising. It's fairly blurry and gooey. Oops. But let's bring this coin up towards the lens. Whoa. That's interesting. This is coming into focus. And that's in focus. And it's a little bit closer than the 50, and definitely further than the 28. And also the magnification is somewhere in between those two, closer to the 50, obviously. But that's really surprising to me. So I'm going to go to the 86. And it looks like I'm going to have to take the camera off the tripod, so we're going to do shaky cam. And it's coming into focus. That's not too much of a macro. I'm going to say I'm about 9 inches from that, 10 inches in that range. And it's still a pretty good amount of magnification. But that's definitely surprising to me. So let's see what I can do. There we go. This is really interesting. So the lesson here is that if you have a zoom lens, that's the only way you can reverse mount a lens and get the ability to focus. I gotta say, I am fascinated by that and very surprised. Alright, so here's the last lens we're going to try. This is the 36 to 72 Nikon Series Ii, and that's it at 72. It's a little bit looser than the 43 to 86, so it tends to like to slide with just a little nudge. But we're going to do the same thing we just did with the 43 to 86 and see if this functions as a zoom as a macro lens as well. And you know, I'll tell you, 4 minutes ago I would have said not a chance, but with the results from the 43 to 86, there might be a chance. Alright, so here we are with the 36 to 72, and it's coming into focus. There it's in focus, and it's almost at 36. Doesn't like to hold that. So it's in focus at 36 in the setup that you just saw. So I'm going to zoom it out to 72 and see what happens if I move the camera away from the subject. It just gets more and more out of focus. Oh, I'm sorry. This is 72. This is 36. So I'm going to move this lens. This zoom works in reverse as of the other. Oh, and there we go. That's a nice high magnification zoom, almost as good as the 28. So it seems as though there's a correlation between focal length and magnification factor when reversed on a camera. And I would have, it stands to reason, and I predicted that the 24 would have after substantial thought and a long debate, I predicted that the 24 would have the most magnification. I am fairly surprised to see that the zooms do, more than fairly. And also very surprised to see that the 200s and 135s could do nothing. And I don't know why that is. But at any rate, so I hope that this video was helpful to you and that you learned something about reverse mounting lenses for macro photography. And this guy right here, he says that if this video was helpful, you should give it a thumbs up. And if you want to, you can subscribe. His nose is pointing at the subscribe button right there to my channel, and you'll be notified when I have more videos come out. And if you have any comments, please leave those in the comments section. He's just reminding you that I will get back to those fairly quickly. I'm pretty good about that. Also, if you have any requests for videos, if I have the technical know-how and the equipment, I'm more than happy to do it. In fact, this video started with a comment that was made on one of my other videos and that evolved into a discussion. And lastly, this lady right here on the back of the coin, I'd like to say, thank you for watching. That's the best girl voice I can do. I can't do girl voices. That's why I'm not a voice actor.